Good morning, Mr. Cohen. How are you doing today?
Good morning. I'm fine. How are you?
Will you please introduce yourself to the jury and then spell your name for the record?
My name is Andrew Cohen, Cohen. I'm a special agent for the FBI.
How long have you been with the FBI?
Since 2014.
What are your duties with the FBI?
I'm assigned to a violent crime task force. I primarily investigate criminal enterprises, complex narcotics investigations, fugitive work, and other violations of federal law.
At some point, did you get involved with the investigation into the disappearance of Gannon Stauch?
I did.
What was your role and how did you get involved in that investigation?
I was requested to assist the El Paso County Sheriff's Office shortly after Gannon was reported missing. My role at the FBI was the lead case agent for the FBI. So information that we obtained from search warrants or interviews or other data would be compiled and would eventually all come through me.
The fact that the investigation spans from Colorado through to Florida and then South Carolina, did having the FBI on board assist with that investigation and just the spread of the investigation?
It certainly did. The FBI has a lot of resources nationwide, and it's sometimes a little less complex for the FBI to arrange resources in other states than, say, it would be for the El Paso County Sheriff's Office locally.
When you said that you were the lead agent, what does that mean for the FBI to have a lead agent on a case?
I was assigned the responsibilities of that case, of maintaining the case file and of making the investigative decisions at the FBI.
Are you also serving as an advisory witness in this case?
Yes, I am.
Is that why you're sitting sort of behind us during testimony here?
That's correct.
Is it probable that you'll testify more than one time?
I think that's up to you.
Yes, it is. So, Agent Cohen, in your work as an FBI agent, is it typical for you to get involved in wiretaps?
I've been involved in several wiretap investigations throughout my career.
What does it mean to have a wiretap?
A wiretap, common language, is actually the interception of oral or electronic or wire communication. In essence, we're able to listen to phone calls or to view text messages as they're sent.
Tell the jury what the process is to gain access to listening to those types of things.
A wiretap is considered a very intrusive investigative method. It's not something that you can just do on any investigation or even at the start of any investigation. Quite frankly, it's the most intrusive technique law enforcement has, where we're listening to somebody's phone call in a scenario where you would think you'd have the highest expectation of privacy, talking on your phone in your own private setting. And not only are we receiving the communications of the person whose phone we've installed the wiretap on, but we're also intercepting communications of other people that would be in contact with that person. So in order to get a wiretap, it's a pretty lengthy process. We have to show to the court that there has been an exhaustion of all other techniques that could be used in an investigation, and that other techniques wouldn't be effective. So in this particular investigation, we had done multiple search warrants. We had done GPS trackers on cars. We had done location on cell phones. We had done physical surveillance. We had conducted interviews. And we have to demonstrate not only to the court that this is a necessary technique and that it would be reasonable that we would collect evidence, but we also have to show that all that other stuff would no longer be effective in the investigation.
What would happen if you've got the wiretap set up, you've got the approval of the judge, and you start to hear something that is outside the scope of the investigation? What would somebody listening to the wiretap do?
Well, earlier I told you that the privacy of individuals is so important. And if we were listening to a wiretap, we have a set of instructions called minimization instructions that come with every wiretap. And part of those instructions, it tells investigators a certain set of rules that if we were to listen to things that weren't relevant to the investigation, that we can't really do that. We'd have to pause the listening for a certain period of time, and then we could pick it back up. Say it could be 30 seconds or a minute, but we'd pause that and then pick back up to see how the conversation was progressing.
Does that protect the information that you're gathering so that it's really only case-specific information as opposed to extraneous or other private information that might be discussed in other types of phone calls?
That's correct.
Was a wiretap method used in this particular investigation?
Yes, it was.
During the process of you being involved in obtaining wiretap authorization from a court, and your knowledge of the case, was it apparent that this particular defendant was switching the way that the person was communicating, meaning phone numbers or devices, that type of thing?
Yes.
Tell the jury about that.
Well, the defendant in this case had her original phone seized by law enforcement shortly after she reported Gannon to be missing. After that, she decided she was going to leave the state of Colorado, and she purchased a new phone at a Walmart with a different area code under a name of a person who may or may not really exist. It certainly wasn't her.
Was that purchase made in Trinidad, Colorado?
Yes, it was.
And then do you know this because of listening in on the wiretaps and seeing what numbers are being used, but also because of another investigative method that was being used in this case as well?
We had other investigative methods being used too. We had done search warrants for financial records for the defendant, and we found that one of those financial records was a purchase at a Walmart in Trinidad. Some further investigation led us to the purchase of that telephone.
And then we had Mr. Stauch on the stand the first day of testimony in this case, and we listened to some recorded phone calls, which I think we've articulated as pretextual phone calls. Is that another method that you're able to obtain that information that the defendant was using other phone numbers beyond the first phone that was seized by law enforcement?
Yes, it was. One of the common things that I've seen in my training experience as an FBI agent is that people who are involved in criminal activity oftentimes will change phone numbers or will download Wi-Fi only calling applications that allow them to have different phone numbers frequently, and it's mainly to avoid the detection of law enforcement.
Is that an intentional act by somebody that is being investigated?
Those applications don't self-install on a phone. Cell phones don't just show up in your car. So yes, those are all very intentional acts.
Okay. And then as you're doing these wiretap investigations or methods, are those phone calls actually recorded so you can listen to them later?
Yes, they are.
Is that what occurred in this case, that wiretap conversations were recorded that captured the defendant's voice?
They were.
Did you have actual physical contact with this particular defendant?
Yes, I did.
Were you familiar with her voice?
Yes, I was.
The person that you had physical contact with and you know as the defendant, is she present in the courtroom today?
She certainly is.
Will you identify her by where she is sitting and what she is wearing?
She's seated at the defense table. She's wearing a pink shirt and has long dark hair and currently has her hand on her chin.
Your Honor, that's that the record reflect that the witnesses identified the defendant.
The record will so reflect. Go ahead.
And how did you become familiar with the defendant's voice?
Through several aspects. I had reviewed body cam footage from when deputies originally responded to the defendant's home. I had listened to other phone calls she was involved in. I saw the defendant give interviews on the news, and ultimately I was present for her arrest.
And the pretextual phone calls that you were participating in, and then these wiretap phone calls that you were able to intercept, are all of those voices that are caught in these recordings the defendant's voice?
Yes, they are.
I may approach with 688, 689, 690, and 691.
You may.
Special Agent Cohen, I've got in my hands People Exhibit 688. It's a disc. Do you recognize it?
I do.
How do you recognize it?
I reviewed this disc and I initialed the disc.
What does the disc contain?
This contains wiretap calls, recorded wiretap calls.
Does it indicate a time and date of this particular call?
This particular call is February 18th, 2020 at 10:14 in the morning.
The file that this disc contains, is it a fair and accurate representation of that particular phone call?
Yes, it is.
As it relates to 689, do you recognize this disc?
I do.
How do you recognize it?
I've also initialed this disc.
And what does this disc contain?
This contains a recorded phone call from the wiretap on February 18th, 2020 at 10:19 in the morning.
Is this file on this disc, is it a fair and accurate representation of that particular phone call?
Yes, it is.
And then looking at 690, do you recognize this disc?
I do.
How do you recognize it?
I've also initialed this disc.
And what does this disc contain?
This contains a recorded wiretap call on February 18th, 2020 at 11:16 in the morning.
Does this file on this disc, is it a fair and accurate representation of that particular phone call?
Yes, it is.
And then looking at 691, do you recognize this disc?
I do.
How do you recognize it?
I've also initialed this disc.
What does this disc contain?
A recorded wiretap call on February 18th, 2020 at 2:47 in the afternoon.
Does it actually say 1447?
It does.
And that's 2:47 p.m.
Correct.
Is this file on this disc, is a fair and accurate representation of that particular call?
Yes, it is.
At this time, I've moved for admission of 688, 689, 690, and 691.
Mr. Tellini?
Your Honor, subject to the section I had in the prior hearing.
Counsel approach, please. Exhibit 688, 89, 90, and 91 are admitted. Go ahead.
And permission to publish starting with 688, Judge.
You may.
How can I help?
Yes, I didn't get any confirmation about
for my test I paid for.
And so just for reference sake, before we get too deep into the phone call, sounds like there's two voices.
That's correct.
Do you recognize one of the voices?
I do.
Is it the female voice?
Yes.
And whose voice is that?
That's the defendant's voice.
Okay, go ahead. Thank you, Angela.
Okay, can I have your name, please? I can check if we've got the order here.
Yes. Tisha, last name is Stauch, Stagch.
Okay, give me one moment, please. Let me have a little look. Okay, yeah, perfect. I can see that we've received that, and we have actually sent the test. Have you not received that yet?
Have what now?
We have already sent the results to your email account.
I don't have them. Mm-mm.
Okay. Okay, let me try resending that, and if you don't receive it, give us a call back.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you, now. Bye-bye.
So Special Agent Cohen, the phone number that at the very beginning, let me back up. There you can hear ringing. Does that indicate that this is a phone call that was initiated by the defendant to a particular place?
That's correct.
Were you able to investigate and determine who it was that she was calling?
I was.
What was the phone number that she was calling?
Objection foundation would be.
Mr. Allen?
I can lay some foundation, Judge. When a wiretap is obtained, does it record both the outgoing and receiving phone numbers?
As part of the overall wiretap in this investigation, we also installed something called a pen register trap and trace device. That particular device will record both the outgoing or incoming phone number from the subject telephone.
And so does that mean that the receiving phone, the person that is being dialed or a place that the originator is dialing would be caught in this trap and trace?
That's correct. It's identified as either an outgoing or incoming phone call, and we have the telephone numbers on both ends of that conversation.
And then were you able to look up that particular phone number that was dialed for this call and see it being associated with a particular webpage?
Yes, I was.
What webpage was that?
Fakepolygraph.com.
Okay. And is that what all of these phone calls are in relation to, is calls originated by the defendant to a purportedly fakepolygraph.com webpage?
That's correct.
Okay. Let's jump into 689 and permission to publish 689, Judge.
You may go ahead.
May I help?
Hi, yes, I was just talking to you. Is there a way you confirm where you sent those? Because I still didn't get them.
Yeah, so I'm just going to get that resent for you. So if you wait for the next sort of 10, 15 minutes and let me know if you haven't received it by then.
I was saying, can you check the email? Because I just want to make sure.
Okay, yeah, give me a moment. Spelled TECIALYNN2006 @yahoo.com.
Okay, cool. So you said
Okay.
like 10 to 15 minutes.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. Have a good day.
In that particular phone call, did it sound like there was an email address that was confirmed to the defendant?
Yes.
What was that email address?
It was Tisha Lynn at 2000. I can't remember the exact address, but it was an address that we knew to be associated to the defendant.
Okay. And that's what sounds like an English speaking person relayed, and then the defendant acknowledged that as being the correct email address.
That's correct.
Okay. And then 690, permission to publish, Your Honor.
You may go ahead.
Hello, how can I help?
Hi, yes, I'm calling again. I still didn't get that email.
Okay, can I ask your name, please?
It's last name Stauch, Stauch.
Ah, right, yes, perfect. I can see here.
Because it's not 10, 15 minutes and you said it again. I still don't have it.
Yeah, no, unfortunately, it's actually been blocked by management, this order, due to the content of the questions, so we're not going to be able to send this report.
Okay. So, do I get my money back?
Unfortunately, not on this case, no. Obviously, true to our terms and conditions, it does clearly state that any sort of illegal activities or anything like that, obviously, the management do reserve the right not to send the report. Obviously, we do incur processing fees, so that's why a refund wouldn't be due.
So what do you do now? Just delete it and go on about life and take money?
Yes, we would do indeed.
I got you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Now. Bye-bye.
In that particular call, is it essentially being communicated that a polygraph result is not going to be provided because it's associated with the illegal activity?
Is leading and further the jury for only their own determination.
Sustained on second grounds, jury can make their own determination.
Okay. And then permission to publish 691.
You may go ahead.
Hi, how can I help?
I did it hang up.
Oh, yeah, sorry, I can hear you now. How can I help you?
Okay. I talked to you earlier and you said that the request I did was blocked or something, but I looked on the terms and conditions and it says you can say things about like infidelity and stuff like that. So I'm not sure how that was blocked.
Say that again, sorry. You can or can't?
No, okay, so I did a report earlier and you said you would send it to me. Then when I called back, you said it was blocked, that I wasn't allowed to get a report. But then I clicked the terms and conditions and it says you can do questions about infidelity and stuff like that.
Yes, infidelity you can, correct.
Right, and that's what I did.
Your report was about infidelity, was it?
What did you say?
So you're saying your report was about infidelity?
Yeah, like I put questions in for it and you had to like answers and you said something about it being blocked.
Yes, and what were your questions?
So it was about during the time that we were away inside of in another state that I talked to, and I gave the person's individual's name, Ortega. That was one of them. Then it said, "Are your eyes blue?" And I did a couple of the questions that were on the bottom.
Okay. Yeah, not sure in that case. Unfortunately, that's not what came through. Yeah, I'm not quite sure what's happened there then.
Because I read that you can do this. Yeah, it says on there that you can do that.
Yeah, you would be able to about infidelity, but the questions that were submitted here were not to do with infidelity.
Yeah, I didn't submit questions that were not to do with infidelity.
Okay. All right. See, well, I'll have to look into that then in that case.
Do you want me just to write you the questions down?
No, it's okay. I'll just need to have a look into this then to see what can be done.
Okay.
Just remind me again, what was the name on the report?
It was Stauch, Stauch.
And that's your surname, is it? Your last name?
Yes.
Okay. And first name is?
Tecia.
Okay. And how do I spell that?
It's Tecia.
Tecia?
Yes.
Okay. All righty. Well, let me have a look into that and I can come back to you.
Okay. Thank you.
What's the best number to get you on?
843. 798. 1700.
Okay. Right. Thanks a lot now. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Special Agent Cohen, these phone calls are from February 18th, as you've testified. Were you aware also at this same time that that's when these pretext calls were being recorded involving Al Stauch and the defendant?
Yes, I was.
Were there phone calls during that time with those pretext calls in which the defendant was talking about getting a polygraph examination?
Yes, she was.
What was she trying to convince the listener, I guess Al Stauch, of during those conversations?
Objection, speculation, as to good one.
Sustained. I think you can rephrase and refer back to the conversation, but I think it's up to the jury to make a determination about what the defendant's state of mind was during the conversation.
Sure, I understand, Judge. What was she saying to Al as it relates to the polygraph?
She was saying that she had passed a polygraph test and she was continuing to purport her innocence and that she had nothing to do with Gannon's disappearance.
Passed a polygraph as it relates to what?
Whether she had anything to do with Gannon's disappearance.
Okay. Okay, that's all I have. Thank you.
Cross-examination, Mr. Tellini.
I don't have any questions for Agent Cohen at this point.
Do any of the jurors have any questions for Agent Cohen? Thank you, sir. You may step down.
Thank you.
Prosecution, call your next witness, please.
We would call Christina Cervantes.
Last name again?
Cervantes?
Cervantes.
Yep, it's spelled Cervantez, I believe.
Sorry, I need to write faster, don't I? Please raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm the testimony about to give in this matter will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
Go ahead and have a seat in the witness stand. Please watch your step as you step into the stand. Mr. Allen?
Thank you, Your Honor. Will you please introduce yourself to the jury and then spell your name for the record?
My name is Christina Cervantes, Christina. Last name Cer, V as in Victor, A-N as in Nora, T as in Tom, E as in Edward, C as in Zebra.
Do you need a glass of water?
Yes, please.
There's a water pitcher there.
And be careful when you unscrew the lid because it comes out fast when you do that.
You have to turn it just a quarter turn roughly, I think. It happens to all of us. Don't worry about it. What is your current occupation?
My current occupation is crime lab specialist with the Texas Department of Public Safety in Texas.
Did you used to work for the sheriff's office here in El Paso County?
Correct.
What was your occupation with this sheriff's office?
Evidence technician.
What were your duties associated with being an evidence technician?
My duties were to intake evidence as it was collected from the scenes, from the officers as well. We also responded to calls when we had evidence to collect from those scenes. We also received phone calls from the public in reference to getting their property back.
And what were your dates of employment with the El Paso County Sheriff's Office?
I was employed with El Paso County Sheriff's Office from 2015, and I believe that was August of 2015 to January of 2022.
Okay. Were you working in January, February timeframe of 2020 for the sheriff's office
That is correct.
in that same evidence technician role?
Correct.
You mentioned that sometimes you would get calls from people in the public. What were those calls typically in relation to?
Typically, they were the public wanting their property back. Anytime we had evidence collected, the person would call oftentimes and ask for their property to be returned to them.
Would that happen fairly regularly?
Yes, sir.
And when they're asking for property to be released back to them, is this property that might be held for either a criminal investigation or even a civil matter?
That is correct.
What would be the, I guess, the protocol on a civil matter if there's some property that's held by the sheriff's office and it's a civil issue?
So if it's property that is held within a civil matter, usually we would have to get authorizations from the detectives in charge, letting us know what we could release, what we couldn't. Oftentimes, if there was an authorization from the court stating, hey, you can release this, it usually was signed by a judge, we could release it that way as well. But we always have to have that authorization in place before we could release it.
What was the protocol in place as it relates to any evidence or property that's held on a criminal matter?
On a criminal matter, usually until the case was completed and we got the proper authorizations, till those were received, we could not release it until that time.
Okay. As it relates to this time frame, do you remember working on February 12th, 2020? And I know this is over 3 years away, but do you remember working at that time at the sheriff's office as an evidence tech?
Yes.
Do you remember getting phone calls as it relates to the Gannon Stauch / Letecia Stauch investigation?
Yes.
What were the nature of those phone calls that you were receiving in the evidence area for the sheriff's office?
So the nature of the phone calls could range from callers calling in saying they would like certain items of evidence back. From what I can recall, on several occasions, I had received phone calls in reference to property belonging to Mrs. Stauch.
Okay. So just so that we're all understanding, did you receive some calls in which the caller identified themselves as Letecia Stauch?
Not that I recall.
Okay. So had you had a chance to hear Letecia Stauch's voice prior to these phone calls coming in?
At one point, I did. I do recall her coming into the lobby area at one point.
Okay. So what do you remember about that particular occasion?
I just remember her coming in and asking for her property back. And at that time, I told her I did need to get in contact with the lead investigator to make sure it was something that we could, in fact, release to her.
Okay. So you had a direct person-to-person interaction with her.
That is correct.
Did you hear her voice during that interaction?
Yes.
And do you see that same person here in the courtroom?
Yes.
Will you identify her for the jury, pointing to where she's sitting, and describe her clothing?
She is wearing a pink sweater, dark hair, long dark hair.
Your Honor, ask that the record reflect she's identified the defendant.
Record will so reflect. Go ahead.
And then did you get phone calls after that interaction with that same voice from the defendant?
Yes.
In a particular phone call, did you get a phone call from that defendant where she purported to be somebody different?
From what I can recall, yes.
Do you remember who it was that she was purporting to be at that time?
At that time, when I first got that call, the voice, it sounded like her, but claiming to be her daughter.
Okay. And when we were using the word her there, you mean her, the defendant?
Correct.
The voice sounded like the defendant, but was claiming to be her daughter.
Correct.
Okay. Your Honor, may I approach with People's Exhibit 280?
You may.
Showing you what's marked as People's Exhibit 280. Is this a recording of that phone call that occurred on February 12th, 2020?
Yes.
Is it a fair and accurate representation of that phone call?
Yes.
Move for admission of People's Exhibit 280. Commissioner Board.
On the exhibit?
Yes.
Yes.
So somebody called and they identified themselves as Harley Hunt.
Correct.
Have you ever spoken in person to Ms. Hunt?
Before?
Yes, before the phone call.
Yes. If what I can recall from 3 years ago, I remember her coming into the lobby area.
Ms. Stauch or her daughter?
Mrs. Stauch.
Okay. Had you ever spoken to her daughter in person?
No.
So you don't have a foundation as what her daughter's voice sounded like
No.
and how much her daughter's voice may sound like hers?
No, sir.
I'd object as a foundation.
Overruled. I think it goes to weight, not admissibility. You
So-
go ahead and publish.
Okay. So I had moved for admit, and I think you just need to formally admit it into evidence, Judge.
Exhibit 280 will be admitted.
Okay. And then permission to publish this particular recording.
You may go ahead.
Office evidence, this is Chris. Yes, I was
That first voice that we hear, is that your voice?
Correct.
And then that second voice, whose voice is that? Based on your knowledge,
Based on my knowledge, Mrs. Stauch.
the defendant.
Correct.
Okay.
earlier. I think you might have been busy or something, so I waited to call back for a little bit. It's okay. Sorry. What time did you call? I just called you like maybe 15, 20 minutes ago, and you said, hold on. No, that wasn't, there's four of us working here, so that wasn't me. Yeah. I'm like, oh, I don't recognize your voice. You were busy. Okay, so I'm trying to find out about some contents of mine that was in a car. So my book bag, which had a lot of my Social Security card, birth certificates and stuff, and that was in a car that's still impounded. And I just want to know, they gave me the purse one day out of it, but how can I get the book bag? And I need my MacBook for school. Your MacBook, okay. What is your name? Harley Hunt. Harley Hunt, and do you have a case number so I can look it up? Let's see this. I have this paper. It says agency number. Is that it, or I have a VIN number? It should be agency. Agency number. All right, 2020-1382. All right. Let's take a look here. Excuse me. Excuse me. Thank you. Thank you. You said it's a book bag? There's a black and white book bag that was in the back seat of the white Jetta. And it has like my passport, my social, my birth certificate, my dog paperwork, my MacBook. Okay. Let's see here. Yeah, there's like there was one blue bag that had a MacBook in it. And then there was a black and white book bag, and there was like my diamond rings are in it. And then there's a pink folder that had like my birth certificate and all that in it. Okay. Let's see here. Like, I understand they might still be holding the car, but like I can't like even like work or anything without having my passport because I'm a flight attendant. And okay. And you said your name was Harley Hunt. Is that correct? Harley Hunt. Harley Hunt. Okay, Harley. Well, I can tell you right now, everything on this case is evidence. So because it's evidence, I cannot release it back to you without written authorization from basically a higher authority. They have not given us any written authorizations to release. So unfortunately, what you may want to do is contact the detective on this case. Have you been in contact with anybody? Yeah. Okay.
All right. Well, let me go ahead and get the lead detective's number for you, and you can call them in reference to this. Okay.
Okay.
All right. Hold on just 1 second. Yeah. Okay, Harley?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's going to be Detective Bethel.
Okay.
And her desk number is going to be 520-7291.
Okay. Okay. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Have a good day.
Goodbye.
Ms. Cervantes, did it seem odd to you also the comment about it being a flight attendant?
I'm sorry, repeat the question?
Yeah, did it seem odd to you when the caller requesting the information back, I guess, relayed to you that they were a flight attendant?
Yes.
Overruled.
What was odd about that?
Just the fact that her daughter being young, the age, I found it odd to be that age and a flight attendant.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. That's all I have.
Cross-examination.
No question.
Do any of the jurors have any questions for Ms. Cervantes? No? All right. Thank you, ma'am. You may step down.
Thank you.
Prosecution, call your next witness, please.
We called Detective Michael Bauman.
Detective, if you would step forward and raise your right hand, please, sir. Do you swear or affirm the testimony about to give in this matter will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Go ahead and have a seat in the witness stand. Please watch your step as you step into the stand.
Good morning, Detective. Will you please introduce yourself to our jury and then spell your name for the record?
Good morning. My name is Michael Bauman, Bauman,
Detective, who are you employed by?
the El Paso County Sheriff's Office.
What do you do for the sheriff's office?
I'm a digital forensics detective.
What are your duties associated with that position?
Basically, my job is to find and preserve data that may be evidentiary of nature on electronic devices.
What kind of electronic devices do you typically work with?
Computers, cell phones, DVRs, things like that.
And then is there a particular device that helps you get data off of these other electronic data points?
Yes, sir. We have a number of devices that we use. For instance, with computers, we use a software and hardware combination called Celebrite. We also use something called Gray Key, which is for extracting data from phones. For computers, we use Axiom and kind of beefed up computer workstations.
Tell the jury what Celebrite is. You mentioned it.
Celebrate is basically a combination of hardware and software. It is it's a little device that plugs into the USB on your computer, and then you can plug phones into that and so forth and extract data from the phones. And then Celebrite has a second function, which it actually goes through that data and turns it into something that's readable and sortable and so forth.
Do you have particular training that allows you to use that particular, is it a device or what is it?
It's a device. It's a combination of hardware and software.
Do you have training that allows you to use that?
Yes, sir.
What does that training consist of?
Well, I have 3 different certifications with Celebrite, and basically 3 levels. The highest level is Celebrite Advanced Smartphone Analysis. It's just basically each one was the first 2 together were a week long, and then the CASA, the smartphone analysis one, was also a week long. That specifically dealt with using that tool. Basically, it's a hands-on program that you go and county spends a lot of money, and I sit there and learn how to use the machine, basically, and get an idea of what it's doing. So,
tell the jury about what the process would be like if I handed you a phone to use with this device. What process would you go through to obtain the data from that phone?
So, effectively, if we know, for instance, we know the passcode, we'll use that as an example. We'll take that phone. We will. You set the phone up by enabling developer options and things like that. If it's Android, if it's iPhone, it's different. If it's iPhone, you just tell it to stay awake, basically. Then you plug the phone into the Celebrite UFED device, which is the little thing I talked about that you plug into your computer. And then you go through the steps on the screen that allows the phone, and you're interacting with the phone and the computer to set up permissions so that you can download data off the phone.
So basically selecting what data you want to extract from that phone?
Well, I mean, yes, what you're really doing is setting up the computer and the phone so that they can talk to each other. Generally, we do, I don't want to go too deep in the nerd world for you, but we use an application programming interface, Celebrite, which is kind of like a translator. It allows Celebrite to speak to computer, right? So, iOS is talking to Windows at that point, so that it can say, okay, this is the data that you can pull off of the phone. And so that's kind of how that works. And so then it pulls the data off the phone. We then use the physical analyzer software to parse through that data and find the files that are in there.
What kind of things do you typically extract from a person's cell phone?
It depends on the phone, but oftentimes we extract, pictures, text messages, instant messages, internet search histories, activity data, locations, all those types of things.
What do you do with that information when you extract it? You put it on a disk?
Yes, sir. We'll take that information, run it through Physical Analyzer, and then we'll take and create what we call a Celebrite report. And that Celebrite report is basically a standalone piece of software that puts all that data into something that you can categorize and search and let me look at these time frames, or let me search for these keywords in the extraction of the data we were able to pull.
Is it typical that you obtain these phones that you use this device on comes from some other detective that's involved in an investigation?
Yes, sir, generally.
Will that detective generally give you some guidance as to what they might want off of that phone if you can obtain it?
Sometimes, frankly, again, I don't want to go too deep in the weeds but Celebrite's able to parse about 400 out of 4 million applications. Now that was a couple of years old, those numbers. So I generally try to pull as much as I can, and then I allow the detective to take and based on the scope of their warrant or their waiver, they go through that data and find out what's pertinent to their case, since I don't know the case like they do.
Okay. So you're kind of leading into the next area that I wanted to go into. Once you put this stuff into a Celebrite report, as you described, put it onto a disk, does that then make it accessible to other detectives in the investigation to use for whatever investigative purpose they may or may not have?
Yes, sir. So once we've done that, we'll turn that over to whatever team is going to examine the device, and they'll go through and say, okay, we need to find all the messages that may contain the word John. So they'll go through and search for those things, or whatever might be the case in their actual investigation.
Would they do that separate from working hand in hand with you? They would do it on their own?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Are there other people with the sheriff's office that have training in being able to use a Celebrite device to obtain data off of phones or other devices?
Well, through attrition, no. Currently, I'm the only digital forensics detective with those certifications, or at least with current certifications.
Okay. Let's go back in time to January, February timeframe of 2020. Were you working at the sheriff's office back then?
Yes, sir.
Did you get involved in the investigation into the disappearance of Gannon Stauch?
Yes, sir.
What was your role in that investigation?
Again, basically what we just talked about. I was a digital forensics investigator dealing with DVR, computers, phones, etc.
Did you have an occasion to used Celebrite on 2 separate devices in that investigation.
Yes, sir.
When you get a device, like in this particular investigation that we're talking about, do you necessarily know who that particular device belongs to?
No.
So what information do you pay attention to make sure that the data that you extract from a device is assigned to that particular cell phone or whatever it might be?
Well, primarily, the first thing we do is try to keep things separated, but I generally try to look at like IMEIs, the identifying numbers in the phone. That's generally how I try to identify which phone goes with which extraction, things like that.
When you said that kind of quickly, the court reporter looked at you. Did you say IMEI?
Yes, ma'am. IMEI.
Okay.
Sorry.
So is that a unique identifier that's assigned to cell phones?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So let's talk about, did you have a chance to look at a rose gold iPhone 8 in this case?
Yes, sir.
Your may I approach with People's Exhibit 222?
You may.
If you could just look over People's Exhibit 222, and when you're done looking it over, will you let me know?
I'm done.
Okay. Do you recognize People's Exhibit 222?
I do, sir.
What does it purport to be?
This is actually a Blu-ray disc containing a Celebrite of, I annotated it as Tisha's iPhone.
Okay. And when you do the Celebrite download, do you get the IMEI number? Is that right?
Yes, sir.
Are you able to obtain phone number associated with a particular phone when you do the Celebrite?
Depends.
Okay.
At times we'll do an extraction with it just depends on the extraction.
Okay. Do you remember for this particular one, if you're able to get the phone number in the report for this particular iPhone?
I don't recall. I can look at my report and see if that refreshes my memory.
Would that refresh your memory to look at your report?
Yes, sir.
Or may he refresh his memory with his report?
You may go ahead.
Thank you.
Do you have it up there with you?
I have, yes, sir.
Okay.
And so that the record's clear, you're asking for the phone number that's identified with this Celebrite extraction, right?
That's right. Yeah.
Excuse me just a second here while I pull out my Papa glasses. Yes, sir. I believe I have that here.
Okay. What was the number associated with that particular iPhone?
843-6557-460.
Okay. 843-655-7460. Is that what you said?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Thank you. When you do an examination on a phone with this Celebrite process, do you examine the phone for any physical damage?
Yes, sir. Generally, I'll look at the phone and see if the screen is cracked. I'll try to annotate those things in the report.
What's the purpose of that?
Well, there's multiple purposes. One is that we want to make sure that the device functions, so we're able to actually manipulate it to do the download. The other thing is we also want to make sure that we're showing the state of the phone when we receive it, so that down the road we can show that the phone's still in that same condition, that we didn't damage the phone or something.
Okay. Did this particular phone have any physical damage or defects?
Do you mind if I look at my report?
Would that refresh your memory?
Yes, sir.
May you refresh his memory with his report, Your Honor?
You may go ahead.
Thank you. I noted in the report that I observed no major defects on the device.
Okay. And then did you, in fact, perform a Celebrite extraction of that particular phone?
Yes, sir.
Is that extraction on People's Exhibit 222 that's in the envelope in front of you?
Yes, sir.
Your Honor, move for admission of People's Exhibit 222.
Defense?
Subject to objection raised in the prior hearing.
All right. The objection's overruled. The Exhibit
222?
2 will be admitted. Go ahead.
Thank you, Your Honor. May I approach with 224?
You may go ahead.
Yes, sir.
Swap you out.
Outstanding. Thank you.
Have you had a chance to look over People's Exhibit 224?
Yes, sir.
What does it purport to be?
This is again, a Blu-ray disc with a Celebrite of item number 671, which was an iPhone.
And when you examined this particular iPhone, did you have any contextual information about who this iPhone belonged to, where it came from, anything like that?
I don't recall. Actually, I may have heard that this was Tisha's other phone. I don't recall.
Okay. Was this by chance a phone that was seized in South Carolina from the defendant?
Yeah, that was my understanding, yeah.
Okay. Do you remember, were you able to get the same kind of identifying information, IMEI, like you mentioned earlier, on this phone?
Yes, sir.
Do you know if you were able to get a phone number associated with this particular phone?
I believe we were, yes.
Okay. Do you remember off the top of your head what that phone number might have been?
I would have to refer to the report.
Would that refresh your memory if it's in there?
It would.
Okay. May he refresh his memory, Your Honor.
May, go ahead.
Thank you.
Getting your glasses out again.
Yeah, either that or you'll have to hold it so I can see it further away like that. Sorry.
Your arms aren't quite long enough anymore?
No, sir, they've gotten shorter, I think. Let's see. Okay. The phone number associated with this phone is 843-798-1700, 1700.
Did you do a physical examination of this phone as well to look for any damage or defects?
I believe so.
You believe so, or you did or didn't?
Yeah, I did. That was a
Okay.
matter, yeah.
Okay.
I don't remember what the results were, we'll say that. So,
Okay. Would it refresh your memory to look at your
would.
report? May he refresh his memory.
Thank you, appreciate it. Actually, it looks like I didn't actually note on this one that any damage, which would indicate to me there probably wasn't any damage, but I didn't actually specifically
Okay.
note it in the report.
That's fine. Just so that we're very clear though, did you say was or was not any damage?
I'm assuming there wasn't. I think I would have noted it if there was. However,
Okay.
I didn't specifically note it.
Okay. And then did you actually go ahead and perform the Celebrite extraction on that particular device as well?
Yes, sir.
Similar to the last device that we just talked about, did you place that on the disk and that's what's in People's Exhibit 224?
Yes, sir.
All right, move for admission of People's 224.
That's
Same objection.
overruled. Exhibit 224 will be admitted.
Okay. For these particular two devices, did you do anything beyond extracting and putting them on disk and admitting into evidence?
There were a team of us that that kind of looked through things. I don't recall that there was anything specifically that I did that somebody else didn't do as well that wouldn't have been annotated
Okay.
by them.
Okay, perfect. Just want to make sure. That's all the questions I have, Your Honor.
Cross-examination, Mr. Polini.
Detective Howard.
I'm good, sir. How are you?
I'm not too bad. Sorry. So just so I understand, that somebody gives you a phone, then you hook it up to this Cellbrite, and the Cellbrite basically takes everything off of it it can, and that's put in a disk for the detective then to go through.
Effectively, there's kind of an intermediate step where we use that other software. There's the UFED software, which actually pulls the information, and then the physical analyzer software is a second piece of software that actually goes through that information and turns it into something that people can read. And then I create the report from that.
Okay.
Yeah.
But I mean, as far as like the information that is being taken from the cell phone by Cellbrite, that's not contained by any dates or any other parameters. That would be up to the detective who does the search.
Correct, because Cellbrite doesn't, it would be kind of like if you had a self-driving car
Yeah.
and you only taught it to recognize stop signs. You wouldn't want to trust that car to drive you around town because it doesn't know the rest of it, right?
Sure.
And so Cellbrite knows 400 out of 4 million applications that it knows how to sort through. So we pull as much as we can so that we have the ability, if we need to manually sort through the other things, if that makes any
So,
sense.
I mean, the Cellbrite will basically pull years and years. If I've had a cell phone for 5 years, it would literally, it possibly pull 5 years worth of text messages.
Maybe more. If you had pulled that information, if you had pulled information from another device over to your
Okay.
phone at some point, you'd say you're all the way back to whenever Android started. So, so yeah, that's how that would work. So,
Okay. Thanks, Detective.
absolutely.
Redirect.
No.
Do any of the jurors have any questions for Detective Ballmer? No? All right. Thank you, sir. You may step down.
Thank you very much.
Prosecution, call your next witness, please.
Yes, Sergeant Kurt Smith.
Okay, Kimberly. Sergeant Smith, if you would step forward and raise your right hand, please, sir. Do you swear from the testimony about to give this man will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Go ahead and have a seat in the witness stand. Please watch your step as you step into the stand.
You all situated?
Yes, sir.
Good. Good afternoon, or good morning, I should say. Will you please introduce yourself to the jury and then spell your name for the record?
My name is Kurt Smith, KURT-SMITH, and I'm a sergeant with the El Paso County Sheriff's Office
How long have you been with the sheriff's office?
since 2006.
What is your current assignment with the sheriff's office?
I'm currently the sergeant of the Major Crimes Unit.
What are your duties associated with that assignment?
We investigate homicides, officer-involved shootings, kidnappings, major felonies. I currently oversee 7 detectives who lead those investigations.
So that jumps into what I was going to ask about specifically as a sergeant, what do you do? And is it basically overseeing those detectives in their investigative efforts?
Yes, we manage their caseload. We manage and keep track of how the case is going, making sure it's thorough, accurate, making sure that all the leads are being followed up on, and making sure that they have the resources that they need to do their job.
What was your assignment with the sheriff's office back in January 2020?
I was the Special Victims Unit Sergeant, so I worked in the same investigation division, but I supervised 6 detectives who were doing crimes against children, things like that.
Did you get involved with the investigation into Gannon Stauch and him being missing?
Yes, sir.
How did you get involved in that investigation?
I was assigned to do several tasks. Obviously, it was a large investigation, so everybody within the division was assigned to a task or two at the time.
At some point, did you have get assigned a task to perform a Celebrite extraction of a particular cell phone?
Yes, sir.
What kind of training do you have that allowed you to do that Celebrite extraction?
In 2014, I was transferred to the investigation division as a detective. During that time period, I was trained how to operate the Celebrite equipment. Since that time, I've done about 75 roughly downloads of cell phones.
Describe, and I don't need you to go into as much depth as we did with the last witness because we just talked about the same concept, but describe what that process looks like when you are trying to extract data from a cell phone from your perspective.
So you would plug in a phone to get a charge. You would plug the phone into the Celebrite machine. You go through and you have several options of different extractions that you could do. And basically it creates an image of the phone. So it's basically like creating a copy of that phone that goes in the computer, and then the Celebrite software will decode it, for a better word, and give you a report of what's on the phone itself.
What do you do with the information once you extract it from a phone?
The phone is it's generated into a report that's readable. It's usually a PDF or a couple different fonts or formats that I burn to a disk and I place into evidence. I also give a copy to the detective so they can go through and look at the phone and see what's on it.
Okay. Your Honor, may I approach with People's Exhibit 227?
You may.
If you would look at People's 227 and let me know when you're done.
Yes, sir.
Do you recognize 227?
Yes, sir.
What is it?
It's a Blu-ray disc. It's item number 45 inside of an envelope.
What does the Blu-ray disc contain?
The Blu-ray contains the Celebrite report for the phone that I did.
Do you know what particular phone this was?
It was an iPhone 6, but I can't tell you whose phone it was, sir.
Okay. On the evidence label, does it give you some identifying information about the particular phone?
Yes, sir. It says it's the kid's phone.
He's reading off the evidence label, Your Honor.
Overruled.
What does it specifically say? If you could just read it.
It says Blu-ray containing Celebrite report from kid's phone, iPhone 6.
Okay. Does that just then contain the Celebrite of that iPhone 6 that you did a Celebrite download on?
Yes, sir.
Is it a fair and accurate copy of that Celebrite report?
Yes, sir.
Your Honor, move for admission of People's Exhibit 227.
Exhibit 227 will be admitted.
Similar to what we just talked about with the last detective that was on the stand, once it's on that disk and downloaded from the phone, is that then accessible for the greater investigation if detectives want to access it to maybe search for specific things that might have been contained on that phone?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And was that the case with this particular disk?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Thank you. That's all I have.
Cross-examination, Mr. Killeen. Do any of the jurors have any questions for Sergeant Smith? No? All right. Thank you, Sergeant. You may step down.
Judge, if we may approach.
You may.
Oh, do you want to go? I was going to do it. Okay. Go ahead.